Billionaire stunned as single mom pleads, "Please save my daughter." What happens next is INCRED. Sarah Jones felt her heart thud in rhythm with the hurrying bustle of the diner, the aroma of grease and coffee mingling uncomfortably with her rising anxiety. She wiped sweat from her brow, darting between tables, trying to remember orders and balance tips while the weight of her life pressed down on her shoulders. Each table held its own story, but hers was a silent scream echoing in her mind, a desperate plea for help that she couldn't afford to voice except today. Today was different. As she passed by a table draped in crisp linens, she couldn't help but overhear the patrons discussing healthcare costs. Words like outrageous and ripoff floated through the air, cutting deeper than a knife. She knew all too well what those costs meant. With Lily's recent diagnosis, the medical costs felt like an anchor tied to her heart. She pressed her palms into the counter, feeling the coolness as she hesitated to serve the businessman seated nearby. The fear clawed at her insides, twisting her thoughts. What if I fail her? What if I can't keep her alive? Her hands trembled as she made her way back toward the well-dressed couple with an uncomfortable smile plastered on her face. Little did they know, she was juggling 2 jobs just to scrape together enough for her daughter's medicine while not even knowing if it would work. She felt like a ghost, drifting through the din of the diner filled with laughter and clinking glasses, yet utterly invisible. "Please, if anyone can help, just save my daughter." Her voice sprouted from her throat before her mind could intervene. It hung in the air, a trembling thread of vulnerability as she turned away, anxiety gathering in her chest like a storm ready to unleash itself. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Jack Reynolds, a man who had built walls around himself thicker than steel, lifted his gaze from his untouched meal as he processed her plea. Those words echoed ominously in his mind while a tightness seized his chest. The stark difference between their worlds felt insurmountable. He had spent years drowning in the coldness of his wealth, untouchable by disaster, until now. Could he step into her mess? The thought sent waves of conflict surging through him. He enjoyed an empire built on profits, far removed from the realities of people like Sarah. Yet, the sheer despair in her eyes unsettled him, awakening a flicker of empathy he hadn't felt in ages. Dread unfurled inside Sarah as she wrapped up her shift, each footstep heavier than the last. She knew she wasn't just battling an illness. She was wrestling with fate itself. Would she ever be able to return to school, to escape this suffocating cycle of survival? The dream of becoming a doctor flickered like an ember, threatened by the storm of responsibilities dragging her down. All the while, as the clock ticked away, thoughts of Lily's fragile smile loomed large, demanding that she fight against every impossible number stacked against her. Every step seemed less about moving forward and more about evading the crushing weight of reality. As she locked eyes with Jack across the dim-lit diner, a charged silence enveloped them, each holding the echoes of their past lives, eternally altered. In that moment, the stakes felt inconceivably higher, and the question loomed ominously between them. Would either of them be ready to confront their deepest fears, or would they both remain shackled by their respective worlds? As the future of both herself and Lily danced precariously at the edge of uncertainty, Sarah's breath hitched in her throat, tension rising as she faced the man who could change everything. But whether he had the courage to do so remained painfully unresolved. The bright neon sign flickered above Jack Reynolds, casting sporadic glows across his expressionless face. He hadn't expected to feel this way after overhearing Sarah's plea, a woman caught in a cycle that felt both foreign and palpable. For years, he maneuvered through transactions, building an empire while emotionally barricading himself from vulnerability. But now, a burgeoning sense of responsibility surged through him, unearthed by a mere whisper of desperation. He watched as Sarah hurried to the back of the diner, her energy diminished, shoulders slumped as if caught in an unforgiving tide. The moment her eyes met his, there was a bond forged from shared suffering, a silent acknowledgement of their disparate realities. How bizarre to consider that someone who floated on a sea of wealth could potentially save a life brimming with such potential. Jack pressed his hands against the table, suddenly determined to rise above his self-imposed isolation. Decision-making cascaded through his mind like a flood, battling one another for dominance. What if I can actually help? The thought felt revolutionary yet terrifying. Maybe today was not designated for business, but for something unrecognizable, a chance to step beyond shadows and into raw authenticity. Yet, self-doubt whispered quietly in the corners of his mind. Could he bear the emotional weight? Was it possible to connect with someone like Sarah and still remain whole? Meanwhile, Sarah's thoughts twisted like a maze. The diner's noise faded into an echo. She craved a reprieve, a moment where her emotional chaos could align with logical clarity. She squeezed her eyes shut, images of medical bills and ceaseless phone calls surfacing like ghosts demanding to be exorcised. I can't let Lily down, she chanted internally, tapping her foot nervously as she wiped down tables, the mundane task contrasting jarringly with the tempest swelling deep within. Every hour spent waiting tables felt like an eternity, but the urgency of her situation propelled her forward. She had to reach out, not just to Jack, but she sensed an instinct within her, the kernel of hope that lay buried beneath layers of struggle. Taking the plunge into her dreams felt like grasping at shards of sunlight peeking through closed curtains. When her shift finally ended, conviction coursed through her veins. Uncertainty hung thick in the air as she made her way to the back room, determination anchoring her steps. She could either wallow in despair or confront this moment. In an act of raw courage, she neared the front booth where Jack sat, unyielding resolve solidifying in every stride. "Excuse me," her voice wavered slightly, nerves darting through her as she mustered courage. "Can we talk? I mean, about your offer." The desperation in her tone was palpable, but beneath it lay the blazing fire of resilience. Jack's eyes locked onto hers, surprise flickering in his features, but the hesitation was unmistakable. The prospect of engaging in a matter far more complex than either had anticipated loomed over them, melding their disparate worlds with the potential for something powerful. What if this conversation changed everything for both of them? "Sure, let us talk," he finally replied, his voice steadier than he felt as they settled into conversation. The worries of tomorrow faded, replaced by an intensifying pulse of possibility. Who were they to each other, and what would they risk to unravel the complexities of their lives? Neither realized that beneath the surface of their exchange lay deeper conflicts waiting to erupt, questions of belonging and real transformation yet to be recognized. As they began to speak, a new tension unfolded, hinting that the answers they sought might not only change their lives but would challenge the very foundations on which they stood. And as those words left their lips, the age-old battle between fear and resolve ignited anew, threatening to reshape their fates forever. Would Sarah find the strength to confront her vulnerabilities, and would Jack rise to the occasion of his newfound role as an ally? Jack leaned forward, absorbing Sarah's words as if they carried a weight he hadn't anticipated. The air between them thickened with the gravity of her situation. In that cluttered diner booth, the reality of their lives collided: a single mom's desperate struggle and a billionaire's cocoon of wealth. He'd always viewed himself as a solution provider, but now his confidence wavered. What if he couldn't deliver? "Tell me what you need," he urged, his mind racing through possible avenues. The philanthropic initiatives he controlled felt so distant from the raw urgency of Sarah's life. Her eyes brightened at the plea, yet the flicker of vulnerability danced behind them, challenging him to take a leap deeper into her world. "It's not just about financial help," she began, her voice a mix of conviction and fear. "It's about hope, guidance. I don't want Lily to grow up believing she has to fend for herself. I want her to dream." Hope. Jack sat in silence, absorbing the profound simplicity of her desire. Dreams he'd lost touch with his own, buried beneath endless meetings and corporate ambitions. Could he rediscover that part of himself in helping another? Sarah's words wove through the fabric of his life, snaking around his responsibilities. "I'm scared, Jack," she confessed, a crack threading through her tough exterior. "I've never asked for help like this before." The vulnerability in her voice struck Jack, ringing like a bell in the vast emptiness he had carried within him. He remembered the countless deals he secured through sheer will, his mind tightening around numbers and profits, while intimacy and connection crumbled at his feet. Neither have I, he finally admitted, the honesty surprising him. But sometimes confronting our fears can lead to something greater. An instinctual realization surged. This moment wasn't merely about Sarah's plea, it was a pivotal opportunity for both of them. She studied him, uncertainty melting into intrigue. You really want to help? The sincerity was disarming. I need to help, Jack replied, finding strength in the admission. He envisioned a new trajectory, not just for Sarah, but for himself. The path toward vulnerability and connection unfurled before him, appearing both daunting and electrifying. And what if I'm not ready for that? Sarah challenged, her voice steadier than before. What if it's too risky to hope? Jack recognized an opportunity for self-exploration. Life has risks, Sarah. The question is, are you willing to take one and find out what lies on the other side? He tapped the table, feeling the pulse of agreement form between them that a transformative shift was happening in the diner, a conversation that could alter their fates. Each word ignited sparks of introspection. They weren't merely exchanging concerns. They were stitching together a tapestry of potential futures. Jack's thoughts spiraled into possibilities of mentorship, a partnership that transcended their contrasting lifestyles. What if I could help not just Lily, but you as well? He proposed, his excitement bubbling. I could introduce you to people, connect you with resources, maybe even a job that allows you to nurture those dreams you spoke of. The gravity of his offer hung between them, an invitation to step into the unknown. Would Sarah accept this lifeline? Would she allow someone into her chaotic world and embrace the complexity of interdependence? Sarah hesitated, her thoughts a whirlwind of what-ifs and possibilities. The shadows of doubt crept back in, threatening to overshadow her burgeoning hope. Jack read the flicker in her expression. This is not just about helping. It's about both of us discovering who we are when we step outside our comfort zones. The words resonated, planting seeds of anticipation in their hearts. But what if Sarah's past came back to haunt her, if she dared to hope? Their connection deepened with every moment they shared, and outside the diner, thunderclouds built up in the sky, hinting at a storm. What lay ahead for Jack? The risks of opening his heart, and for Sarah, the fear of pursuing a dream. Was it time for them both to confront their truths? As the first raindrops hit the window, signaling a change not just in the weather but in their lives, Sarah's gaze lingered on Jack. The moment of truth had come. Okay, let us talk about dreams, she said, determination igniting her resolve. And as their conversation unfolded, a flicker of earth-shattering change crackled in the air, leaving them on the edge of a newfound journey, one marked by the confrontation of hope and fear. What would this response lead to? What were they willing to risk for a dream? Jack felt the weight of Sarah's declaration settle into an uncomfortable silence. Her readiness to discuss dreams ignited a storm of emotions within him, and anticipation mingled with uncertainty. Let us start with Lily, he suggested, hoping to tether their discussion to something tangible. What are her dreams? As Sarah previously alluded to her daughter's aspirations, Jack saw a flicker of pride illuminate her features. Lily loves art, she said, her voice softening. She draws every chance she gets. She has this wild imagination, but I don't know how to nurture it. Art supplies are expensive, and I'm terrified I'll stifle her dreams before they even get a chance to grow. Jack leaned back, contemplating her words. The contrast between Lily's innocent dreams and the cynical world that often strangled such wonder struck him. He envisioned potential a parental role he had never considered for himself, transcending mere financial assistance. What if we focused on creating a safe space for her to explore that? Jack proposed, excitement surging through his veins. Could we arrange a trip to a local art studio? Or maybe I could connect you with someone who teaches art classes. There must be resources available for children. As Sarah mulled over his suggestion, he could see the spark of possibility blossoming. Yet, her smile quickly faded, replaced by familiar apprehension. But what if we fail? What if I introduce her to the world of art, and it doesn't go anywhere? It feels like another risk. Every opportunity carries the risk of failure, Jack countered gently, forcing himself to confront his own cautious nature. But every risk also holds the potential for growth. You've been fighting so hard for Lily to have a better life. This could be part of that fight. Sarah nodded, yet doubt clouded her eyes. He could sense that she was poised on the precipice of something monumental, battling an internal tempest that mirrored the brewing storm outside. You talk about growth, but it scares me, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Can you truly understand what it means to be in my shoes? To be so afraid that one more misstep might be catastrophic? It struck him then that beneath layers of success, he had evaded his own vulnerabilities. Perhaps not fully, he admitted. But I've built my empire on risks, just like you're doing every day by simply choosing to dream. We both know that true progress comes from stepping into the unknown, and it often tests us to our limits. A moment of understanding passed between them, and Jack felt the intensity of the exchange ripple through the cramped booth. Sarah's gaze was focused, contemplative, as if weighing the gravity of his words against everything she had experienced. Maybe we start small. Just a class. No high expectations, she finally proposed, her determination surfacing in tandem with her vulnerability. Jack's heart raced. Yes, absolutely. We can scout out local opportunities together. Let us also think about a support network for you other parents, artists, people who can help. As they strategized their way forward, Jack started feeling a profound shift inside himself. Each plan exchanged, each shared idea peeled back another layer of complacency he had wrapped around himself for too long. Could this be his moment to redefine his own dreams through the lens of someone else's need? But a nagging voice in the back of his head questioned whether he was ready for a world outside corporate battles. While he strategized for Sarah and Lily's future, tethering himself further to their journey, he simultaneously faced his own reluctance to confront the underlying fears of opening his heart. As the rain drummed against the diner roof, the storm outside, now symbolic of the turbulence brewing within him. He felt the pressure building, a tempest, not just affecting the weather, but his life as well. With renewed resolve, Jack leaned in closer, his voice steady. Let us also think about your dreams. What about your job aspirations? What do you want? But before Sarah could answer, the diner's door swung open, a gust of wind blowing in as an unfamiliar figure stepped inside, shaking off water from a drenched coat. Jack's heart raced. Who was that? He could sense a disruption on the horizon, like a hurricane born from the gentlest breezes. What would this new arrival mean for their conversation, for their vision, and for the fragile connection they had begun to forge? As Jack absorbed the charged atmosphere, anticipation coiled tightly within him. The moment he had feared all the risks he was now encouraging Sarah to take loomed larger than ever. Jack's breath hitched as the figure entered. The rain-slicked coat dripped onto the diner's wooden floor, pooling in a small puddle that seemed to reflect his own uncertainty. He turned back to Sarah, whose expression mirrored his apprehension, eyes darting between him and the newcomer. It felt as though the atmosphere had thickened, charged with unspoken questions and unresolved tension. The strangers settled into a booth across the diner, shaking their hair free of droplets like a dog emerging from water. Jack furrowed his brow, but he quickly returned his focus to Sarah, who was staring blankly at the table. The old diner, once a cozy retreat filled with the warm scent of coffee and fried food, now felt constrained by heavy expectations. Sarah, Jack pressed gently, trying to cut through the fog that enveloped her. What do you want? What would you choose if fear wasn't in the way? She paused, the question hanging like fragile glass between them. I want to be someone who can support Lily fully. Not just financially, but emotionally. I'm stuck in this job that drains me. Sometimes I think I lost who I was before she was born. Her voice trembled, the admission painful yet liberating. Jack found it easier to imagine Sarah seated confidently at a canvas, her own brush dancing as freely as Lily's. He leaned in, determinedly. What do you enjoy doing, really? Skills you haven't even tapped into? Is there a dream you've tucked away in favor of being practical? It was a practical moment, though, the real need for life beyond survival. A peculiar affirmation knitted between them as Sarah began to open up about her passion for writing, a voice she had silenced after motherhood and responsibilities crept in. Jack's heart pounded. He knew this was the pivot point. The conversation, this moment, could renew something precious in her. Writing could be an outlet for you. Even just starting a blog, he suggested. picturing words pouring onto the page rather than thoughts spilling out in frustration. You could share your story, connect with others, and even inspire them. What if you never take that step? Is the fear of criticism holding you back? Fear. Jack recognized it. For years, he had hidden behind board meetings and investment strategies, convinced that those pain-free victories kept him whole. But watching Sarah dredge up her most painful anxieties, her desire to nurture as much as free herself, forced him to question if he too had been buried alive beneath expectations. The stranger at the booth seemed to notice their intensity and cast a fleeting glance their way, triggering an unsettling awareness in Jack. It violated the rare moment, the development that felt so crucial. He blinked, catching Sarah's gaze again. What if we pursued your writing together? He proposed. We can brainstorm ideas, create outlines. Who has to say you can't find a voice that others will recognize and have an affinity for? I haven't written anything in ages, Sarah murmured, her eyes darting back to the puddle forming on the floor. Jack followed her gaze, realizing their reflections were merged together, a concurrence of potential, yet camouflaged by doubts. Then you'll start now. One sentence, one word, a page, whatever it takes. His resolve was firm, a part of himself breaking free from the corporate shell he had been encased in. Encouraging Sarah to embrace vulnerability allowed him to recommit to his own. Let us face what we fear head on, he asserted, almost recklessly. Write without censorship. Don't worry about what comes after, just let words spill. It'll be your canvas too. The tension in the booth trembled with tangible possibilities before the stranger cleared their throat loudly, interrupting the moment of transformation. Jack looked up, startled, meeting the curious gaze of the newcomer. Everything okay here? The stranger asked, with an expression that felt either intrusive or protective. Jack's heart raced again. Once again, a shift had occurred. This intrusion was unwelcome, yet it sparked a mix of frustration and curiosity in him. Who was this person? What significance did they bear in this pivotal moment? He turned towards Sarah, who wore a half-smile, uncertainty mingling with nascent hope. It's not done yet, he whispered, a hint of urgency igniting within him. Tension didn't ease, it escalated. Sarah, do you want to share your dreams with this stranger? Jack's voice stayed steady despite the uncertainty swirling around them, bringing the moment to a head. As the unexpected presence loomed, Jack wondered if they were about to step deeper into the unknown, an unplanned detour that could crack open their fledgling aspirations or shatter them altogether. Would he have the courage to stand firm amid distractions? Would Sarah find her voice revealed before an audience she never anticipated? Just then, the lights flickered, and the stranger leaned in, dropping a critical statement that Jack couldn't have foreseen, a revelation that could change everything for him and Sarah. What awaited them on the other side of this unexpected interaction? Jack braced himself, heart hammering, as the stranger leaned forward. The flicker of the diner lights seemed to amplify the tension in the air, heightening his senses. Sarah flinched slightly, her half-smile faltering as if she too felt the weight of anticipation pressing down on them. I couldn't help but overhear, the stranger began, their eyes aligning with Jack's. You're discussing writing? That's something I'm passionate about too. The statement came out seemingly benign, but Jack sensed an undertone, a veiled confidence layered beneath. Are you a writer? Jack inquired, his curiosity piqued despite his instinct to maintain the protective bubble around their vulnerable conversation. There was a flicker of something in the stranger's gaze, an eagerness mixed with an unsettling intensity. Sort of. I analyze what makes stories resonate. The stranger shifted, tapping fingers against the table, as if scripting a narrative in their mind. Have you ever considered the driving force behind your words? What do you really want to say? Jack felt an unsettling shift as he recognized the contradiction in himself. Here he was, pushing Sarah to find a voice, while so easily buried beneath layers of routine chatter and corporate jargon himself. He started, then hesitated. What was it he truly wanted to say? The reflection of his uncertainty now mirrored in the stranger's deliberate questioning. Why don't you tell us? The stranger pressed. What is your story? What part of you wants to break free? Jack was taken aback, the sudden sunlight revealing hidden corners of his hesitation. He had spent years on a path defined by others, the family expectations, the relentless pursuit of success rigidly measured by profit and loss. In the haze of momentary clarity, He wondered, was there something deeper he hadn't yet excavated? Before he could respond, however, Sarah interjected, her voice now firm yet tender. It's not just about him. We're talking about writing. This is my moment. The protective instinct ignited, and annoyance danced in Jack's chest. But there was a strength in Sarah's response, a blossoming courage that was too enticing to trail off into the shadows of doubt. He caught her gaze and felt the rush of solidarity and purpose flooding through him. Exactly, he said, redirecting the focus toward her. Your voice matters, Sarah. Let us hear what you have. The stranger's interest seemed to peak, the corners of their mouth turning slightly upward. Yes, Sarah, what is it that you want to write about? Don't worry about what's expected. Speak your truth. It was the moment Sarah needed. The spark in her eyes rekindled as she began to articulate her thoughts, crafting the fragments of dreams and fears into words that fluttered like dry leaves caught in a breeze. Jack leaned forward, the diner fading into the background, encapsulated in the magnitude of her delivery. For the first time, he felt the progression of both their journeys collide, a meshing of desires and aspirations. It was profoundly uplifting yet terrifying. Jack's senses buzzed with urgency. He knew they had to push past the limits set by fear and societal pressures. As Sarah spoke of her experiences, her disappointments, and dreams, Jack silently vowed to reclaim his own narrative, to not allow another moment to slip away under a shroud of complacency. There was more to him than quarterly reports and slick presentations. But just when it seemed that Sarah was about to unleash the core of her truth, the stranger interrupted with a surprising challenge. What is holding you back? What is the root of your fear? Jack flinched at the harshness of the question, its emotional weight pressing down on them all. And as he observed Sarah's thoughtful pause, the mixture of vulnerability and strength leaping within her, he felt a wave of reckoning crash over him. The moment was tipping, and neither of them would leave the diner unchanged. What would Sarah reveal? And could Jack confront the festered anxieties inside him that overshadowed his own potential? With adrenaline coursing through him, he braced himself for what came next, knowing that everything hinged on these unfolding truths. The depths of creativity and self-discovery surged around them, threatening to burst through the dam of their unspoken limitations. And beneath the clatter of dishes and muted drip of rain outside, the real questions loomed larger than life. What if they both finally broke free? What awaited them just beyond the diner's wooden door, once these truths were unleashed? Jack's mind whirred, his internal dialogue spinning wildly with the stranger's piercing question. What is holding you back? It was blunt, a minimalist path toward introspection. He choked on the enormity of it, absorbing Sarah's fragile silence as she lingered on the threshold of articulation. The diner around them faded, and he lost himself in his thoughts, wrestling with the urgency of self-discovery. Each tick of the clock echoed in his ears, a sharp reminder of the time wasted on living a life tailored to approval rather than authenticity. Jack's gaze shifted to Sarah, her hands fidgeting in her lap, the circle of her breath tight and focused as she prepared to dive into her truth. He had nudged her into this moment. Now it was his turn to confront his silence. What is holding me back? He echoed, the question simultaneously simplistic and complex. He had built a fortress around his identity, a facade of professional success, underscored by the accolades of a life that felt increasingly hollow. But what lay behind those walls? His head raced through the narratives his upbringing had forged, the quest for financial stability, the unyielding expectation of always being the reliable son, the dutiful employee. Had he ever dared to dream beyond those constructs? He glanced back at the stranger, their unwavering gaze urging him onward. Fear, I guess, Jack admitted quietly. Fear of failure has been a constant companion. The revelation sparked something within him, a flicker of courage that dared to grow brighter. Fear is just a shadow, the stranger mused, leaning in as if sharing a secret. What if you were to confront it? I wonder what you might discover. The words resonated, adding pressure to Jack's burgeoning awareness. What if I don't know how? He questioned, his voice barely above a whisper. It was a deep-seated anxiety surfacing. He imagined failure not just as a possibility, but as a conclusion, a testament to his inability to break free. It's about experimenting, the stranger replied with a hint of encouragement. Consider this: what if success isn't defined in the way you've always imagined? What if it's about exploring new paths, those uncharted territories within you? Jack's pulse quickened as he chewed on the stranger's words. He thought of the stories he had long shelved in favor of prioritizing stability over adventure. He reminisced about the inching desire to write, to express emotions he had bottled up for too long. Could it be that simple? Meanwhile, Sarah broke her silence, her voice betraying the nerves intertwined with her determination. "I want to write about my experiences, my fight, my story as a single mother," she articulated, her resolve blooming under the stranger's encouragement. "I want to show the world what it's like to face despair and yet keep moving." Jack watched her, envious of her clarity. It lit a spark of longing in him. He needed to articulate his own battle instead of remaining imprisoned within the gilded cage of expectation. The thought directly plunged into the depths of his being, stirring a sense of urgency that he hadn't felt in years. "I want to reclaim my narrative too," he confessed, the weight of his words hanging between them. "But what if it's all just a fantasy?" The dread seeped back in, punctuating the atmosphere with uncertainty. "Then make it real," the stranger urged, their expression inscrutable yet compelling. "Take the leap, right? Why hold yourself hostage to your fears? The pages are unwritten, start to fill them with truth." Jack's heart raced. Could he truly confront his limitations, take that leap? By surrendering to vulnerability, could he actualize his dreams? What lay beyond the diner's portals was an expanse of possibility, grounds that shivered with potential and peril alike. The gust of wind rattled the diner's windows, casting shadows that danced ominously around them. Jack knew the moment of truth was at hand. He felt the pull of a journey waiting to unfold, a labyrinth of discovery where he might finally embrace his voice. That he caught Sarah's eye, a glimmer of shared purpose, igniting between them. They were on the brink of unleashing their truths, but a new wave of doubt washed over him. Would their revelations echo out into the world beyond, revealing their innermost selves, or would they retreat back into obscurity? As the rain intensified outside, Jack could have sworn he felt the diner constricting around them, time shrinking to a pivotal choice. What if this is it? He found himself asking, aware that they were on the cusp of transformation, but also of potential regret. How would their truths influence their narratives? Was the risk of freedom worth the fear of vulnerability? Before he could ponder further, the stranger's voice pierced the cocoon of his thoughts once more. "Then what will you choose to write next?" And as the question lingered in the air, Jack held his breath, torn between the trepidation of stepping forward and the desperate yearning for liberation. Jack's heart raced, the stranger's question reverberating like a drum in his ears. Time seemed suspended, the weight of the moment pressing in around him. The diner had evaporated into a backdrop, and all that existed was the crucible of his self-doubt, smoldering with the hunger for revelation. His stomach clenched tightly as the realization washed over him. This was no longer just a fleeting conversation in a diner. This was a confrontation with himself, a pivotal choice that could fracture his carefully constructed identity or ignite the dormant spark of creativity that lay buried within. "What I want to write," Jack repeated internally, feeling overwhelmed. The possibilities unfurled, mockingly tantalizing yet terrifying. Could he venture into his emotions, wrestle with the demons of his existence, and emerge victorious on the other side? Uncertainty coiled around his thoughts like a viper, and he felt a sudden impulse to bolt, to escape the vulnerability that loomed like an ominous storm cloud. But Sarah's determined gaze anchored him. Her fervor, a glaring contrast to his apprehension, ignited a flicker of hope within. What would it mean to reclaim a narrative that had long been silenced? Was there authenticity waiting to be unearthed beneath the indifferent trappings of his career? As if reading his thoughts, the stranger leaned closer, unwavering. "Your story could illuminate paths for others," the stranger proposed, an undercurrent of urgency threading through their tone. "What if you began by exploring those experiences that haunt you, the times you felt unheard, overlooked, or pinned under the weight of expectation? You have the power to frame that struggle into something powerful. Transform your fears into fuel." Jack flinched at the prospect. Transform his fears. A tidal wave of memories crashed over him. Moments of self-doubt, unfinished projects gathering dust, words left unspoken. Perhaps the thing holding him back wasn't simply fear of failure, but a fear of truly confronting himself. What if no one wants to read it? He couldn't help but question, the shadows of insecurity creeping back in. The stranger's expression remained unwavering, challenging him. Then write for yourself first. Create something genuine. That is the foundation of all great art. The words landed heavily. Each syllable weighted with urging resolve. There was no escaping the challenge that lay before him now. Jack leaned back, a sense of defiance rising within him. If he didn't confront this fear, he'd remain shackled, a mere observer of life rather than a participant. The thirst for authentic expression sparked a dread he had never felt before, both exhilarating and terrifying. That he glanced at Sarah, whose passion was palpable. If she could dive headfirst into her truth, why was he still hesitating? Perhaps this was his turning point, his opportunity to transform doubt into determination. Suddenly, a strategy coalesced in his mind. He needed to establish small goals, just simple actions to start unraveling the complexity of his thoughts. Maybe I could journal, he finally said, the idea gaining clarity as he voiced it. If I write daily, I could find my voice again. The stranger smiled knowingly, while Sarah's eyes widened in encouragement. That's a brilliant start, she affirmed. You'll be surprised where those words can lead you. Jack felt a swell of belief, an inkling that growth was possible beyond this moment in the diner. He envisioned pages filled with unfiltered thoughts, raw emotions bleeding onto the paper. Yet, as the rain drummed an insistent pattern outside, he realized that simply starting wouldn't be enough. Would those immediate attempts at vulnerability reveal deeper truths, or would they instead lay bare an even greater fear of rejection? With each burgeoning idea, he wrestled with a palpable sense of vulnerability surging through him. Could he really, truly place his innermost self on the battlefield of words for others to decipher? As he stared out into the storm, a resolute decision began to crystallize within him. The fear of obscurity was daunting, but the desire for authenticity pulsated in competition. What if I let my weakness guide my writing? He pondered aloud. That moment, the stranger tilted their head, the question marinating in the thickened air. Jack felt the stirrings of something complex unfurling within him, a sense that liberation could be just on the other side of fear. His thoughts turned back to that question which stirred new possibilities in his chest. What if I embrace my vulnerability? What if I take the leap? With each heartbeat echoing his mounting resolve, the challenges ahead shifted into a clarion call for change. But would he be able to maintain this newfound momentum as the pressure of expectations loomed closer? The rain lashed outside, a certainty of chaos matched only by the storm within him. The moment was almost tangible, prompting him to confront what lay beyond the confines of the diner, a world waiting to be penned. Would he step into it, quill in hand and heart exposed? How soon would he translate this written journey into reality? And what shadows would he have to face as he began to articulate his truths? Jack's fingers trembled as he reached for the journal Sarah had recommended, its cover rough and inviting in his hands. The diner's atmosphere remained thick with the impending storm, but he no longer felt alone in his turmoil. He took a deep breath, steadying himself against the swell of doubt that surged anew. It was time to unearth the tangled roots of his uncertainty, and this was the first step toward that reckoning. The clock on the wall ticked softly, each second marking the new territory he was about to explore within himself. Tonight, he thought, I will write. As he opened to the first blank page, the familiar sensation of pressure began to weave through him, almost suffocating in its intensity. What if his words floundered in insignificance? What if the authenticity he yearned to express fell flat upon the page? Jack steeled himself against the wave of despair creeping in again. No more postponing his truth. He had to trust the journey would yield something meaningful. He began to write, letting thoughts flow unedited. The first sentence came out hesitant, as if it were tiptoeing into the unknown. I feel invisible. He hesitated but pressed on, allowing feelings of confusion and rejection to spill forth, unfiltered. The ink scratched against the paper, each mark a courageous step away from fear and towards self-acceptance. Memories of failed projects surfaced, accompanied by the hum of external expectations that had long stifled his creativity. A passage illuminated the tightness in his chest when he recalled the job that had seemed like a dream but had turned hollow. Why is it so hard to share who I really am? The realizations cascaded like the raindrops tapping against the window. Every word beckoned deeper layers of himself to awaken, and he began to confront not just the rejection he feared, but the profound ache of longing for connection through his art. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Outside, the storm raged, but Jack felt an unexpected warmth in his chest, an ember crackling to life. He sensed that in exposing his vulnerabilities, he was forging a new path, one that could reshape his perception of what it meant to be a writer. The spills and thrills of emotional upheaval offered raw material for his craft. He grasped desperately at this feeling, his crude fragments of expression turning into a narrative he never knew he could create. As the rain abated and the chaos outside dimmed, Jack noticed something unfamiliar, a heartbeat of determination. This could be something more, he mused, eyes glimmering with new resolve. What if I channel this into my future work? This notion excited and terrified him in equal measure. However, a nagging doubt crept in as well. A few hours of writing didn't erase years of hesitance or the fear of being unrecognized in a vast landscape of stories. What would happen once he put this raw truth out into the world? Would it resonate, or would it echo only with silence? He paused, pen hovering above the page, contemplating the magnitude of his choice. Every sentence now felt like a stepping stone into a wider universe teeming with potential. But it also presented a much graver risk, the potential for heartache if the world rejected his offerings. Jack leaned back, the chair creaking gently beneath him as weariness washed over him. The journal sat open, bare and waiting. But the vision of what that next step could entail loomed ahead with daunting clarity. How would he handle the inevitable vulnerability that came with sharing these truths? That night, in the quiet infusion of newfound self-awareness and determination, Jack understood he was at the edge of a precipice, a moment that would define him for years to come. He was ready to dive headfirst into telling his story, and yet, the whispers of doubt still lingered, mocking him at the edges of his mind. With uncertainty fluttering like wings in his chest, he wondered, would he have the courage to share those words, to build a bridge from isolation to connection, or would fear ultimately paralyze his efforts? The question hung in the air, thick and charged with possibility, beckoning him closer to the brink of revelation that awaited just beyond his next decision. As the first light of dawn broke through the diner's windows, painting the room in golden hues, Sarah Jones sat at a booth, pen poised thoughtfully over a fresh page in her notebook. Unlike other mornings burdened by worry, this one offered a spark of anticipation. She felt empowered, ready to embrace the journey ahead. Yesterday's conversations with Jack had opened a door to a world she had long believed was shut tight. With each stroke of her pen, she poured her heart into words that had previously been trapped beneath layers of fear. I want to share my story, she wrote, conviction sewn into every line. The act felt liberating. The narrative of a single mother fighting to secure her daughter's future had transformed from a burden into a catalyst for growth. Each word was a testament to resilience, a reminder of the tears shed and the strength found amidst chaos. Across town, Jack Reynolds woke with a sense of urgency gnawing at him. Yesterday's revelations coursed through his veins like adrenaline, forcing him to confront the life he had become numb to. He grabbed his journal, its pages filled with fragmented honesty from the night before, and felt oddly buoyant. Each carefully articulated thought represented not only vulnerability, but an opportunity for redemption. We often silo ourselves, believing we must carry our burdens alone, he scribbled, realizing with clarity that vulnerability was a strength, not a weakness. The prospect of sharing this newfound perspective filled him with excitement. He yearned to cultivate a space where others could also unravel their stories that needed not just to be heard, but to resonate. In the following weeks, Sarah and Jack met regularly to share their journeys. Together, they navigated the intricacies of rebuilding their lives, expanding their dreams, a two-sided tapestry woven from strands of hope and ambition. Jack introduced Sarah to a local writing group, a nurturing environment where her storytelling could flourish. As Sarah read from her growing collection of essays, she felt the warmth of encouragement from her peers. This is it, Sarah thought, a smile breaking across her face as she recognized the depth of connection with the audience. They weren't just listening. They were engaging, finding pieces of their own struggles reflected in her words. With each session, her confidence burgeoned, solidifying her long-buried passion for writing. Simultaneously, Jack took strides beyond the boardroom. He established a mentorship program within his company, seeking to connect his wealth of knowledge with those aiming to break into the fields of business or creative arts. The initiative was inclusive, inviting voices he had always considered potentially invaluable but had previously overlooked. In cultivating these connections, he began to craft a narrative of his own, a narrative where vulnerability paced alongside professional ambition. Months passed, and with them, Sarah saw tangible changes. She began publishing her work, moving beyond circles and coffee shops into the realm of online platforms, articles, and a dedicated blog. Each piece resonated. Readers reached out to express gratitude for her honesty, recounting their stories in turn. This reciprocity of tales carried profound significance, unlocking healing not just for herself, but extending to others grappling with vulnerability. Jack stood beside her, cheering her on, just as she had offered him unwavering support. He published a reflective article on his own journey, encouraging his readers to shed the weight of expectation. Be authentic, he urged, your truth has power. The community that grew around their respective quests for authenticity acted as a cradle of fulfillment. Every shared story brought a sense of connection that neither had known they were searching for. Sarah no longer felt shackled by fear, but rather empowered to pull forth her ambitions. Meanwhile, Jack proved to himself that his worth extended beyond financial success. He was capable of fostering genuine relationships and inspiring change as the chaos of their pasts receded. Jack and Sarah reveled in their uncharted futures. They had not merely conquered their fears, they had transformed them into instruments of growth. Together, they flourished, each sentence they penned writing a new reality, an evolved self. In the quiet corners of life where they had once felt invisible, they now beamed recognition, no longer dependent on external validation, but a deep, abiding sense of fulfillment from within. Today, I'm taking my story to new heights, Sarah declared, her eyes sparkling with resolve. Jack nodded, feeling the same thrill. They were co-authors of their individual journeys. They had reached the zenith of personal and professional growth. The diner, once a sphere of confinement, now symbolized their liberation, their powers of storytelling engraved forever in ink and heart. Your moment for transformation awaits. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It really makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about this ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.